Ladies and gentlemen, in the red corner, hailing from the state of Nevada, representing the Steam and Wise Guys, it's the always feared Vegas Odds Maker. And in the blue corner, the crowd favorite from South Florida, Mark Winning Picks Lawrence. And now, let's get it on!
Against the spread, Winning Picks with Mark Lawrence.
Hi, everybody. Mark Lawrence once again with Victor King, and we're all set to go against the spread on this week's college and pro football cards. And Victor, it's looking more and more like the halfway point in the National Football League, and they're already talking college football bowl matchups. We're getting to that stage of the season as well. First of all, I want to ask you how your week was, and I hope you're doing well.
Similar situation that you had last weekend. It wasn't an overall great weekend for us, but I do see here that Mark Lawrence said here's college football perfect system game of the year. That was a Saturday best bet, and that was on Marshall plus the points against James Madison. Didn't even need him. What a big road win for Marshall. And I noticed in the stats that they held James Madison to 0 for 17 on third downs in that particular game. So that was a really nice call in terms of underdogs for Mark. And for our service, Mark, we did hit our highest rated play of the weekend, which is the over of the week in the NFL in the Houston Texans Las Vegas Raiders game. 58 total points scored there. So nicely done there. And we're starting to get a little bit better here in college football as well. We released 2 overs last Saturday. Both of those games won. That was Tulane and Memphis over the total, and also over the total in the Rice, Louisiana Tech game. So not a bad weekend overall. We are heading into another big-time week. And you know, Mark, next week at this time is going to be even bigger because there are 2 big things happening. Number one, the NFL trade deadline is next Tuesday, November 1st. But not only that, in college football, the first playoff rankings will be released next week as well.
Well, that'll be interesting, Victor. I know that's sort of like trade deadline, if you will. When the college football rankings come out, everybody interest becomes piqued, wanting to know just about who is looking at the possibility of playing in the college football playoff. We know that next year it's going to expand to 12 teams. So there's an argument as to whether or not the playoff will be diluted or not, or whether it's an opportunity for more teams that perhaps might have been deserving to prove their worth. But that's an argument, I guess, for another day. We'll be crossing that road when we get to it. But you mentioned about the stats last week, Victor, and in college football last week, I had a chance to thoroughly go through the Playbook midweek alert this week, and I caught myself up on every stat I could possibly catch myself up on. And as I perused through the midweek alert, these are some of the interesting notes that I came across. I'm going to share them with you and our listeners out there. That heading into this weekend, we've only got 6 teams remaining that are undefeated in college football. So this field is getting chopped down, much like the survivor pool is out in the circuit. We'll be talking with Andy Iskoe about that a bit later on in the show. But the undefeated teams in college football are withering away. Only 6 of them, as I mentioned, 2 of them reside in the Big Ten Conference, 2 of them in the Southeast Conference. And also inside the midweek alert, there are only 5 teams, if you can imagine, in college football, the FBS teams, that have been perfect and have outgained every opponent they played this year. 3 of those 5 teams are teams you would expect: Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. 2 of those teams are teams that I think you would win bar bets on both of the other 2 teams, because I don't think anybody would have a clue who they are. I wouldn't have had I not had my midweek alert to look at it. I sort of would because I've been following it, but I just want to say that. The other 2 teams that have been perfect in the stats this year are Illinois and Texas Tech. Not the big boys, but a couple of overachievers so far this college, especially when time moving forward throughout the end of this college football season. Also inside the midweek alert, an interesting stat that I perused through was there have been a total of 7 teams that have held their opponents to season low yardage marks this season. When I say 7 teams, I'm talking about 7 teams in all that have done just that one of them has done it 5 times. The team that's held their opponent to 5 season low yardage marks. No, 7 teams. I should qualify that were 4 or more times 7 teams have. Only one of them 5 times. That's the Michigan Wolverines, who maybe just aren't getting their due this football season because, according to the midweek alert, they're playing better this year right now than they were last year. That might be a little bit of a surprise, but the stats are the stats. Anything you want to share, Victor, from last week's college football card that perhaps we weren't aware of?
Well, I'm the totals guy, Mark, and I'm always keeping my eye on some of the hotter over and under teams. And there is a king of the over in college football, and it was that Memphis Tigers team that I kind of just mentioned a couple of minutes ago. 7-1 over under on the season for Memphis, 65.7 combined points per game. They are definitely the college football kings of the over, but right behind them are a logjam of teams at 6-1, and those overachieving teams who are 6-1 on the season: UCLA, University of Houston, Louisiana Tech, who again I just mentioned, Arkansas, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Oregon, and Rice. And then, of course, Mark, on the flip side, you take a look at the teams who are 1-7. Hold on, there's an 0-7. There's a team who has yet to go over the total this season. That would be the Rams of Colorado State, who are now 0-7 and a solid under team. Miami of Ohio, the Red Hawks, are 1-7 over under. And then, like their counterparts, there's a logjam of teams at 1-6 over under on the year. Those teams include Georgia, who we'll be talking about today, Georgia Tech, Marshall, Missouri, Kentucky, Washington State, and Virginia Tech. So your top over teams and your top under teams thus far in college football.
Nice review from Victor King from King Creole Sports, publisher of the Playbook Totals Tip Sheet. And if you're thinking about handicapping over-under totals or betting those sides of the games, be sure to download your copy of the Totals Tip Sheet in time for the games this weekend. Let's move it over, Victor, to the NFL side of things with a little bit of look of what we saw. And I'm going to continue, if I may, first on with my review out of the midweek alert. And here's what I've seen so far in the National Football League doing just that. There's been only one team that's been perfect in the stats, meaning they've out-yarded every opponent they played. Perhaps not a surprise, the Buffalo Bills, who happen to rank number 1 in overall offense and overall defense this year. They are clearly head and shoulders the best team in the National Football League as we speak going into this weekend. On the flip side, the opposite end of the ladder, there are 2 teams that have yet to outgain an opponent in a football game. One of them, the Pittsburgh Steelers. The other, surprisingly, the Tennessee Titans, who right now, if the playoffs began this week, unbelievably, they'd be in the 3rd seed in the AFC, but nonetheless, the Titans still looking to win that game in the stats this football season. And ironically, if you will, there are 2 teams in the National Football League that are being out-yarded 100 yards or more a game this season, and they both happen to be playing each other this weekend. And how about it? Here comes the Tennessee Titans again, taking on the Houston Texans, both teams being out-yarded an average yards a game on the field. And just a sidebar note here, Victor, before I hand it over to you. I heard this on NFL.com coming in. I love listening to that station here. You pick up a lot of nice little juicy tidbits. And if you can believe it, this is the first time in 40 games in the series between the Jets and the Patriots in which the Jets will enter the football game with a better record than the New England Patriots. Doesn't matter. They're still the underdog in the game, but they do have the better record, so they can at least have that claim to fame. They snapped that 40-game streak to the New York Jets this year. How about you, Victor, on the NFL side of things? What did you happen to see and pass along to our listeners as well?
Well, Mark, we are 7 weeks now into this 2022 weird and wacky NFL season, and there continues to be just some wild things that are happening on a weekly basis. It makes me think that are we in some sort of a parallel universe or on a different Earth or something? Because in this multiverse or in this alternate Earth, Tom Brady has lost 4 out of his last 5 games. Aaron Rodgers has lost 3 games in a row as a favorite. two of the top 6 worst quarterbacks in the league in this alternate universe are Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers. Two of the top 6 quarterbacks, the best 6 quarterbacks, are Geno Smith and Daniel Jones. In this alternate reality, the New York Giants are 6-1 and the New York Jets are 5-2. So there are some weird things that keep on happening every week. Again, the scoring is down. We've gone through the reasons. You did mention the Totals Tip Sheet newsletter. And, Mark, we do a special page. Page 5 is our red zone page in the Totals Tip Sheet newsletter. And that's applicable these days because on the front page, we talk about another reason why the scoring is down, and that is because offenses are stalling in the red zone. So again, we want to encourage you to pick up this week's Totals Tip Sheet in addition to the other newsletters, because I basically have an entire page where you can look at every team's TD percentage in the red zone at home and away on offense and on defense. And it's required reading if you're going to be betting NFL totals.
Or playing fantasy, right?
Right.
Good stuff, Victor. I love that page in particular because it tells me a little bit more about what happens when it counts. That's inside the red zone of which I love to watch also on my DirecTV each and every Sunday, cutting right to the chase and getting the teams that are going to score. And I love finding out which teams get there and can't do it. So that's a great read inside the Totals Tip Sheet. You want to pick up a copy this week for sure. I had mentioned, Victor, along the way that the NFL playoff picture, if it began this particular weekend, these would be the seeds, the number 1 through 7 seeds. Almost unbelievable. Not at the top, but staggering all in throughout. Number 1 seed still Buffalo and Philadelphia. Number 2 seeds Kansas City and Minnesota. But then here come the guys out of nowhere. Number 3 seed, the Tennessee Titans, as I mentioned earlier, and the Seattle Seahawks, number 3 seeds. Number 4 seeds Baltimore and Tampa Bay, followed by a pair of Big Apple teams, number 5 seeds Jets and number 6 seed Giants. The number 6 seeds Miami Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys. And rounding it out, the 2 LA teams, the Chargers and the Rams, each with the number 7 seed positioning going into this particular weekend. And Victor, also before we move on to our college football game of the week, our breakdown of that, our good friend Steve Crabb, the Texas Tornado from Dallas, mentions every week to us his proposed NFL most embarrassed football team. And there are 3 teams that are playing on this week's card that have legitimate claims to be the most embarrassed team, if not last week, this year, because of what happened last week. One of them, obviously, the New England Patriots, with that embarrassment to Chicago on Monday night. That's Steve's nominee, by the way, the Patriots, because it was a football game that I think nobody saw coming with the Chicago Bears going into Foxborough and winning that game straight up. The other 2, the obvious, the 2 quarterbacks you talked about, Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers, who, by the way, Victor, in both of those losses, they lost to starting quarterbacks that were XFL quarterbacks last week. That's red-faced embarrassment for sure.
It is.
And I've never seen in my life, I put this in the database, Tampa Bay Bucks have lost 3 games in a row as a favorite, all as double-digit favorites. And now they come back this week as a home underdog. That's the reward for doing just that. I didn't find any team that lost 3 consecutive games in a row as a favorite of 7 or more points, let alone double digits. Packers, who are having all kinds of problems here right now, and Aaron Rodgers, I don't know what universe he's living in right now, but he's not clicking with all the players in the team. And I would say this, that I would look for a vast improvement for all 3 of those football teams this week, New England, Tampa Bay, and Green Bay. That would be my assessment about the embarrassed teams. How about yours, Victor?
Right. Put one of the Bays in there, and they are definitely my vote for embarrassing either Green Bay or Tampa Bay. In terms of dog results from last week, nothing earth-shattering. Underdogs went right down the middle last week at 7-7 ATS. However, on the season, NFL underdogs still a very, very profitable 59, 44, and 4 against the spread. That's 57%. Dogs of just 4 points or more on the blind this season in the NFL are 37-19. That's phenomenal. That's 66% against the spread for just dogs of 4 or more points. We've also got from the database, Mark, a 26-9 ATS tightener within that, and that is dogs of 4 or more points taking on any 500 or better opponent have gone 26-9 against the spread on the season. There are 3 of them going this week. Those 3 dogs in that 74% ATS situation are the Bears plus the points against Dallas, Pittsburgh plus the points against Philadelphia, and the Packers plus the points against the Bills.
That's interesting stuff, Victor. And also in that same vein, I want to pass this along because everybody has their own style and their unique way about handicapping. And it's not for me to say which is good, which is bad, or which is indifferent. It doesn't matter as long as you are you're convicted to your handicapping, that you're diligent about what it is that you do. I have a good friend of mine who lives in Las Vegas who has been following this stuff for as long as I have, and he loves betting on games involving trends that are happening today. Not what happened in the past a long time ago and so forth and whatnot. What's going on today? And you mentioned those numbers that you just ran by about the National Football League dogs of 4 or more and how well they're doing. That's his cup of tea. And he loves doing that because he figures there's a few more winners to cash in on before that worm turns, if you will, as opposed to looking back at history and relying on history and not knowing whether or not history is going to come around and stay around this year. So I like those numbers. They're good to add to your arsenal, if you will. What's going on today, you meld that into your past history, and I think you become a better, well-rounded handicapper. Good stuff, Victor. You're tuned in to Mark Lawrence Against the Spread, the nation's most popular sports handicapping talk show. And with that, let's hop over to our featured college football game of Victor, what would it be if we weren't talking about anything other than the world's largest outdoor cocktail party taking place this weekend in Florida when the Florida Gators take on the Georgia Bulldogs? Victor, how do you see the cocktail party shaping out this year?
Absolutely. The cocktail party begins at 3:30 Eastern time on Saturday. Of course, they're going to be playing down here in the Sunshine State as they always do in Jacksonville. And the spread in the game, Georgia opened a 22-point favorite. They're up to 22.5. And yeah, that's the biggest point spread in this particular series since way back in 1996 when Georgia was a dog to Florida, 34 points. So there you go. The largest spread in the game. We're talking 25 plus seasons this week. As far as I'm concerned, it's the over-under line that we're looking at, and the game opened at 55.5 points. It's currently up to 56.5, so that first initial push was toward the over in this particular game. Now, number one, we always take a look at our college football weather report, and as we record the podcast on Wednesday afternoon, I know that's a couple of days early, but there are shower forecasts in Jacksonville, and we may even have some high winds. I'm seeing winds anywhere from 13 to 18 miles an hour, so definitely going to want to keep our eye on the weather forecast as we get closer to that Saturday afternoon kickoff. On the season, Florida comes in as a 4-3 over team. That's 4 overs, 3 unders. Average over-under line in Gator games, 57.2. Average total point score, 59.6. Average plus 2.4. So a little higher scoring than a normal Florida Gator season thus far. I'll go through the reason in a minute or two here. Georgia, however, we mentioned them a few minutes ago, one of the better under teams in all of college football this season. That's not surprising. They're 1-6 over under. Average line is 56.3 in Georgia games. Average score 50.8. Average margin minus 5.5 points per game. Now, obviously, these two teams play each other every year. It's usually in Jacksonville every year as well. Of the last 10 meetings, there's only been 3 overs. 6 games have gone under. 1 game has been a tie. average 44.7. That's about 10 points lower than this week's over-under line. And only twice in those last 10 meetings has there been more than 50 combined in the game. Last year's game ended up going under the total by 9 points. And, with numbers like that, you can probably see which way we're leaning in the game. Now, both teams do have that run-first philosophy on offense. Florida's running for 214 yards per game. Georgia, 197 yards per game. And again, on defense, it's been a down year for the Gators. Definitely in Billy Napier's first season, as they are ranked number 113 on defense. The Gators allowing 437 yards per game. With that said, however, Georgia more than makes up for those numbers with the number 2 scoring defense in the country. They're only allowing 9.1 points per game. Again, number 2 scoring defense in the country. And while I have it here, Mark, can you guess from our little quiz who the number 1 scoring defense is in college football this season?
Wow, the number 1 scoring defense college football this season. I'm going to. My guess would have obviously been the Georgia Bulldogs, but that's not the answer because you asked me that question.
Right. This was one of those overachieving teams you talked about in the beginning of our podcast.
Illinois.
Yeah, way to go.
That,
yeah.
There we
8.9 points per game for the Fighting Illini allowed number 1 scoring defense. Nice job. Very nice job. So, based on the spread and the over-under line in the game, the implied score is Georgia 39.5, Florida 17. Our database models and simulations point to a slightly lower score that finishes somewhere in the low to mid 50s, like 38-14, 30-13. So now, as it is, we'll lean under at that current line of 56.5 points. But definitely, Mark, and all of our podcast watchers and listeners, keep your eyes on Saturday's weather report, as the line might go down if there's some inclement weather.
Victor says, check out that weather, lean to the under in the football game, but check out the weather first and foremost, most importantly of all. The Florida Gators coming in here with head coach Billy Napier. Napier's had a good record in his career taking points. He's 14-6 to the spread, but whenever he's going up against undefeated football teams, he's only 2-6 to the spread in games like that. He's also 0-6 to the number against rested opponents. Taking a look at the Georgia Bulldogs, who many think might be a better team this year than last year. That's kind of hard to believe because they were absolutely dominating last year, and they could well continue to keep surging and end up being better than they were last year. We're going to find that out here momentarily throughout the end of the month and all throughout November here. They've held 5 of their 7 opponents to 10 or fewer points, have the Georgia Bulldogs so far. So that defense is again hitting on all cylinders. The most they've allowed in any football game has been 313 yards to a pretty wide open Oregon offense. So it's for real, that Georgia Bulldog defense. There's no question about that. But when they look at the series here, you could throw a lot of these numbers out in the past, and largely because the last 11 times that Georgia's been in this series with a better record than the Florida Gators have had, they're just 4-7 straight up with only 3-point spread covers. So meaning that when Georgia comes in here expected to win, they struggle. They don't. It's because this is a deep, deep rivalry, and the underdog really comes hard. And in fact, I'm going to lean to taking the points in this football game, if for no other reason that the Georgia Bulldogs have been double-digit favorites in this series only 3 times since 1980. This is the most points that they are laying to the Florida Gators in our database. So with that, hold your nose, grab the points with the Florida Gators in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. You're tuned in to Mark Lawrence Against the Spread, the nation's most popular sports handicapping talk show. I'm visiting with Victor King from King Creole Sports as we're going over the college and pro football cards. And Victor, what do you say? Let's hop over to the NFL side of things, where we've got a football game playing on Sunday that maybe if we put this up on a marquee, if we were at a movie theater and we said starring, and the 2 teams would be on the marquee board, you'd say, who's the stars of this movie? Well, the 2 teams that we're looking at are the only two teams that paired together to have a winning record in the National Football League this week, and we're giving them their just due. That's the New York Giants taking on the Seattle Seahawks in a battle of upstart football teams this year. Victor, how do you see the Giants and the Seahawks faring on Sunday?
The over-under the line, we're right around that key number of 45. And in fact, it looks like 9 out of 10 sports books that I've been looking at are right on that number, 45.0 for the Giants-Seahawks game. And Mark, I've been patiently waiting for the right time to play a Giants game over the total. You know, in the last 3, 4, 5 years, they've easily been one of our favorite under teams to bet on and cash with in the NFL. Yes. But that's when they're playing at home, and they are on the road this week. And I believe that time is this week as they head west to take on Seattle. It perhaps should have been last week on the road against the Jaguars, as the adjusted score in last week's Giants-Jaguars game should actually have been somewhere around 31-24, based on the fact that both teams combined for 888 combined offensive yards. So with that said, the G-men are actually due for a positive point regression on offense this week. It's very comforting to know that the last 4 meetings played between these two teams, New York and Seattle, in Seattle have averaged 51.5 combined points per game. And the theme of this particular game is the fact that both teams are outstanding rushing teams, outstanding rushing offenses. The Giants are running for 5.2 yards per rush this season. Seattle, even better, with 5.5, and that's after losing Rashad Penny. They just inserted Michigan State rookie Kenneth Walker right into the starting lineup, and he's proved to be just as good, if not better, on the ground than Rashad Penny. But anyway, it sets up a couple of really nice high-scoring situations from our database. I got a 13-1 here over-under all-time in the database. We're looking for Game 3 or greater non-division home Seattle, who average 5.1 or more yards per rush if they're taking on any opponent who allows 5.1 or more yards per rush on defense. And New York does, as they allow 5.7 yards per rush on the season, and the average OU margin in these games plus 8.9 points per game. Was an underdog in each of their last 4 games. They're now laying points at home. And this has gone 11-0 over-under since 2016. Non-division home favorites who were underdogs in each of their last 4 games when the over-under line is 46 or more. That applies to Seattle. And like their counterparts, the traveling Giants are also off a non-conference road win. I just touched on it last week on the road against the Jacksonville Jaguars. NFC Dogs off a non-conference road win that went under the total last week have gone 10-0-1. That's 10 overs. No one tie since 2007. The stage is set. Now, in the game, I'm holding off until I see this line go down to 44.5. As it is right now, we're going to make a play on the over. But if you really want the best OU line value, we want to be able to cash a winner if this game finishes right on that key number of 45. So hold off, track the. If you see it going down a half a point, that's where we make our move. Giants, Seattle, over the total.
It's all about the numbers, guys. Victor says look for that 44.5 total in this football game and then go over. Get the rubber bands out and wait for that 44.5 for Victor's side to go over the total in this football game. And as we mentioned here, a matchup of 2 upstart football teams. If you looked at their projected season win totals before the season began this year, neither team was expected to even win 8 games on the season. Coming into this football contest, you got Seattle is 2 right now with 6 wins in the season. here so far. Got the same way. These two football teams have been absolutely the total surprise, along with the New York Jets, for the National Football League thus far this football season. The Giants are 6-1 now for the first time since 2008, when in 2008 they ended up being the number one seed in the NFC for the National League playoffs. Their quarterback, Daniel Jones, is finally getting his due. He's played behind so many different coaches and so many different offensive coordinators, the kid didn't stand a chance. It's all working for him right now, and it's working in the right way for this football program here. With Brian Dable, their offensive coordinator, he's an offensive genius, and Daniel Jones is just really benefiting from everything that he has in his arsenal. Jones, the offensive player of the year, I say of the week last week in the National Football League, and he's won that award 3 times in his brief young career, has Daniel Jones. He rushed for 107 yards last week. He's the first New York Giant quarterback to rush for 100 yards 3 times in the same season since 1934. He's the second leading rushing quarterback in the National League this year. We all know who the leader is. That's that guy up in Baltimore who likes to run more than he likes to pass. But Daniel Jones right now is balancing this offense himself out, along with his running back, the big boy from Penn State, and Daniel
Barkley.
Jones. Yeah, Saquon Barkley. Between the two of them, they got a really, really nice, well-balanced offense here. Take a look at the Seattle Seahawks coming in here. You've got Geno Smith, who is arguably the National Football League comeback player of the year this football season here, and would be a Pro Bowl quarterback if the votes were taken today. We mentioned about their 2/3 of the way to their season win total so far this year. The one little hole that I see in the Seattle Seahawks is the fact that they've only been favored 1 time this year. And they lost that game straight up to the Atlanta Falcons. Can they carry the weight against the surging New York Giants? That's the big question in this football game. Victor mentioned about the fact that Seattle does what New York doesn't do well, and that Seattle runs it for over 5, Giants cough it up over 5. I love 5-by-5 running teams, but especially as an underdog. Seattle's now laying points in this football game. I'm not going to chase that, especially knowing that because NFL dogs who won their previous 3 games in a row straight up as an underdog are 14-5 to the spread, going all the way back to 2000 when they take on an opponent off a win. I'll grab the points of the New York Giants in this football game for my side in this matchup of these two surprising upstart football teams on Sunday. You're tuned in to Mark Lawrence Against the Spread, the nation's most popular sports handicapping talk show. And it's time for one of our favorite segments on the show this week as we hop out to Las Vegas to get the Vegas vibe from our good friend Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. And the first question I have to ask you is, how is everything going for you in Vegas these days?
Mark, everything is going nicely. It's sad to see the baseball season winding down, but I'm looking forward to what should be an intriguing series. And, of course, NBA, NHL starting up, and college basketball just a few weeks away, a sport that we both love so very much. And meanwhile, we're in the heart of the football season. We're at or slightly past the halfway point with the colleges. NFL will be there in a couple of weeks. We're starting to get answers to a lot of the questions that we had following the first 2 weeks of action in the NFL. And let's hope and make sense of those answers and use them to our profitability going forward.
Well, as we mentioned at the opening of the show, Andy, here, we're going to be talking about the second half of the National Football League season here real soon. It's getting closer and closer with each passing week. And we've had some upstart football teams as we broke down Giants, the Seattle Seahawks, the only 2 teams in a matchup of winning teams meeting one another this week on the National Football League card. A lot of that probably has to do with the fact that we're in the bye week portion of the season. But nonetheless, these football teams like the Giants, the Seahawks, the Jets have really been the surprise and the talk of the National Football League thus far this season here. Andy, are there any props that you're aware of teams like those, the Giants, the Seahawks, and the Jets, that I know you can still play them to win the Super Bowl, and you're going to get them at today's prices, because you can never find the price today isn't what it was before in the past. But is there anything that's being, I want to say, maybe steamed or favored or being bet about amongst these new upstart surprising teams to win the Super Bowl now as opposed to when the season began?
I haven't really seen any, but I haven't really looked for any of those props. The one prop that of that nature that normally comes up during the course of the season, but of course is no longer applicable, is will any team or will a specific team either go winless or unbeaten? That prop usually shows up after about week 7 or week 8. We didn't get there yet. So if Philadelphia continues to win a couple of more games, we may see that prop. I would imagine, however, in some of the offshore books and maybe even in some of the jurisdictions outside Nevada, depending upon their state regulatory commissions, there may be some bets like that. I know, for example, one thing that the South Point has done here in the past few years for March Madness is they have offered groups of 4 to 6 teams. Will the winner of the NCAA tournament emerge from this group of 6 teams or another group of 6 teams? So we might see something like that. I know William Hill out here has been very creative in offering propositions like that. They will, for example, at the start of the playoffs, offer all the possible combinations of let's say you can bet Kansas City over San Francisco in the Super Bowl, or San Francisco over Kansas City, or the Rams over Kansas City, or et cetera, et cetera. But I haven't seen any in-season things here in Nevada, but I'd almost be willing to wager that it is available somewhere.
Well, it sure be nice to see something in the National Football League along that same vein, where if you lumped in teams like the Jets, the Giants, the Dolphins, maybe another team, and picking that whole group as a chance to win the Super Bowl and getting them in a package price. That might be intriguing, and we'll end up seeing whether or not.
How about will one of the New York teams, which includes the Jets and the Giants who play in New Jersey, but also Buffalo, and all the California teams, will one of those teams to the Super Bowl? Will 2 of those teams make it to the Super Bowl? Will none of those 6 teams make it to the Super Bowl?
That's a real nice prop. I like that. Pass to get that word out there, Andy, because we can talk a lot about that, and there'll be a lot of possibilities with that.
I know where the Eagle fans would be betting.
Yeah, I know exactly right. Hey, we're visiting with Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. We're getting the Vegas vibe and everything going on in Las Vegas this football season here. And Andy, if you give us a little brief update on what's going on in these contests right now. I know we talk about, and you'll get to, I'm sure, in just a moment or so, Survivor contest, and I know that thing has to be diminishing with each and every passing week. So how do things shake out right now at the biggest contest in Las Vegas at this stage of the season?
Well, let's start with the one contest. I'll give the standings for this contest. It's almost impossible to give a consensus for the Golden Nugget contest because they have in their college and NFL games. So in a typical week, you're looking at 75 to 80 possible games, sides only. But I do give the standings. They make 7 picks per week over the course of the season. So they've made 49 picks so far, and the leader getting a point for a cover and a half point for a push. 32.5 out of a possible 49 points. One contestant is at 66.3%. That's almost 2 out of every 3 possible wins. And there are 3 more contestants, a point and a half back. So that leader has a nice small cushion going into week number 8. Looking at the Westgate contests, and I think we have up on the screen the 5 selections from last week and the current standings. The consensus going into last week through 6 weeks of the season was a nice 20, 10, and 0 pushes for 66.7%.
Nice.
Of the 5 teams last week, the top 4 choices, Lions, Jaguars, 49ers, and Buccaneers, all failed to cover the spread. The one team that did cover the spread were the Cincinnati Bengals. So a 1-4 week added to that previous consensus. Through 7 weeks, 21, 14, and 0. That's still a solid 60% even after that 1-4 week. There's one sole leader in the contest, again, using points rather than wins and losses, because you do want to factor in those pushes. One contestant is at 75.7%. That's a 26-8-1 record, as you can see in the standings. 2 more are basically a point, a half point behind them, and then 2 more contestants at 72.9%. In the Super Contest Gold, where there are only 80 entries, so a consensus isn't really all that significant. The current standings, 2 contestants also through 5 picks a week, 40 picks, 24, 10, and 1 are in the lead, hitting exactly 70%. Two more contestants, 24 and 11. That's 68.6%. And of course, that's the $5,000 entry fee winner take all contest. Turning over to the two mammoth contests that have really overtaken the Superbook as far as the most highly played contests, the two at Circa, beginning with the Circa Millions, which is based upon the Westgate Super Contest, 5 picks a week. You can see that the consensus last week, the 5 teams, again, the top 4 teams lost, and the 1 team did cover the spread. The 5 losers in order, Lions, Jaguars, Buccaneers, and 49ers, all failed to cover the spread. And the New York Jets, getting +1 at Denver, won the game outright. So that's a 1-4 record for Week 7. The consensus 18-11-1 coming in, and heading through Week 7 into Week 8, 19-15-1. So that had a significant impact, that 1-4 week. That's just 55.7%. Now, we talk about 55.7% as disappointing, but let's not go back that far many years, where the consensus of the Super Contest for many, many years, when it was a lone contest around, was below 50% for a good part and throughout many seasons. So actually, the field as a whole has grown stronger and deeper as these results show through 8 weeks, 55.7 and 60% for the two big contests. The one leader in the Circa Millions, 27.5 out of a possible 40 points. That's 78.6%, so a shade under 80%, and that's good enough for a half-point lead over 2 more contestants. And then there's a gap of a game to 4 more contestants. So we've seen the percentages go down, but still, we're almost halfway through the season, 7 out of 18 weeks, and hitting nearly 80% for the lead in that contest is very impressive.
That's Andy Iskoe with an update of what's going on in the meet in Las Vegas, as we do each and every week here on Mark Lawrence Against the Spread. Andy publishes one of the finest football
By the way,
newsletters.
I don't know if you're going ahead. We're going to do the Survivor contest.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did jump out of
I thought you were going to wrap up the selection contest and lead right into the Survivor contest, because that's such a unique and very interesting contest there.
No, you know what it is, Andy? If I appear to have like the look of black eyes, it's because I got murdered in the contest last week, okay?
Oh.
And I'm still probably a little groggy from that, but you don't win every week, and hopefully we don't lose as badly as I did last week. But nonetheless, thanks for the reminder. Take us over to that Survivor contest. Perhaps, like you say, arguably the most popular of all the contests.
Yeah, over 6,000 entries at $1,000 a pop, a $6 million guaranteed prize to the one or several people who last the longest. The first 2 years of the contest, we had 35 or 36 contestants 2 years ago. They modified the rules a little bit last year, and there were still 5 people who managed to go 20-0 because they broke Thanksgiving and Christmas into 2 separate weeks. Don't know if we'll have multiple winners this year, because 6,000 entries, over 6,133 entries, over 6,000 have now been eliminated through just 7 weeks. Starting Week 7, 382 contestants were alive. Now, the rules of this contest, just pick a team straight up. Sounds easy. You can only use a team once. So you're going to make, if you go undefeated, you're going to make 20 picks, meaning that there's still 12 teams that you won't have to pick over the course of the season. Last week, 3 teams were eliminated that cut the field from 382 down to 125. The teams were the Patriots, were 175 of the 382 picked them and lost. 70 were eliminated with the Buccaneers. 5 each on the Chargers, and surprisingly enough, 2 people failed to submit selections. They automatically got eliminated. So 257 down last week, leaving 125. That's just 2.0% of the original 6133 entry field. And to put that into some sort of context, last year, where there were 5 people who made it through the contest unbeaten and split the, at that time, I think it was a $4 million guarantee. They only had 4,080 entries, so that's about 2/3 of what they had this year. Yet 2,131 of those 4,000 plus entries were still alive. 52.2% of the field was still surviving after 7 weeks, compared to 2%, or 125 out of 6,000 contestants this year. So it's going to be a very exciting race to the finish. And I'm wondering, I don't know if the Nevada Gaming Board can do this on this type of contest, but wouldn't it be interesting to have a prop up there? Will any contestant go unbeaten for the entire season in the Circuit Survivor contest, or pick the week where the last survivor will be eliminated.
That would be an interesting. I kind of doubt seriously the former, Andy, in that you're sort of like juxtaposing the contest because of where it stands now today. But as far as what week the last member standing and last contestants goes, be open to anybody at any particular time. So that would be interesting. I like your props and I like your thoughts.
Well, the interesting part about that is they normally say it has to be decided on the field of competition. Well,
yes.
I don't know that anyone would be making a bet because the contestants are all trying to win. If they were trying to lose, that'd be a little bit different. Not that it's any easier to pick losers than it is to pick winners, but the fact that everyone wants to extend the contest as long as might give they're talking now about the Gaming Commission allowing wagering on esports. So there's not that far of a stretch from esports to the latest one. They have now legalized, and I think they're going to put it into effect sometime in the next few months. What's it called? Face slapping competition.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
You may want to Google and YouTube that and find out.
I have. I'm absolutely
human
stunned.
ingenuity knows no bounds.
Oh my goodness.
Or brains.
Well, I'm glad we don't have a face slapping segment on the show. That's for sure. It's kind of wild and strange, but nonetheless, it's the times, I guess, Andy, that we do live in. So that being said, if you would, Andy, I know our listeners also like our look ahead line segment that you share with them. Basically, these are lines that were either posted at the beginning of the season at the Superbook. We published them in the National Football League in the Playbook Preview Guide magazine. Lines that the Superbook posted last week in terms of lines that we'll be looking at next week. So if you could, Andy, share some of those with our listeners out there that you feel are noteworthy.
Sure. These are games that all of them had lines posted over the summer where you could actually make. They were limited amounts, but you could wager on any game in any week through the 18 weeks. Then what they've done at the Westgate for probably 5 or 6 years now, about 10 days or so before the following weekend, they post actual bettable lines, revised lines, and then they are reposted and revised after the following week's game. So week 8, which is the week we're about to play, these lines, after I give you the summer lines, these were posted on the Tuesday before last week's games, meaning 6 games had been played, but none of the week 7 games have been played, and then they were reposted Sunday afternoon after most of the after all of the early and some of the late games had been played. So I'm going to start with the Thursday night game. Interesting line movement here, more so than the posting number. Baltimore at Tampa Bay. Over the summer, the Tampa Bay was a 3-point home favorite, and the 10-day advance line a week ago Tuesday, they were put back up as 3-point road favorites. After Sunday's games, Tampa Bay was reinstalled as only a 1.5-point home favorite, and the action over the last 3 or 4 days has turned that one around. So Baltimore now a 1-point road favorite at Tampa Bay. Saints hosting the Raiders. That was a pick'em over the summer, and when the game was reposted in the 10-day advance line, it was again a pick'em. After the Saints had lost at Arizona on Thursday, and the Raiders had that nice win, or at least certainly a nice second half in defeating Houston over the weekend, the Raiders were made, surprisingly, I think, a 2.5-point road favorite. Money has come in as I thought it would on the Saints, where the Raiders are still favored, but only by 1.5 right now. One of the more interesting line moves of the week, and I'm sort of at a loss to explain it, the Vikings over the summer were 6.5-point home favorites over the Arizona Cardinals, and that was also the line when they posted it for the 10-day advance line. When they posted it after Sunday's actions, where the Cardinals had already beaten New Orleans on Thursday night and the Vikings had a bye, they did adjust that line down a little bit towards Arizona. Vikings favored by 5.5. Yet as we do this podcast, more money has come in on Arizona. Minnesota now just a 3.5-point home favorite. One of the more interesting games, the Patriots at the Jets. Patriots over the summer were 1-point road favorites, and even though they got off to a struggling start and the Jets got off to a very strong start, the game was posted at the 10-day line with New England still a 1-point road favorite. After Sunday's action, where Denver won at Buffalo and the Patriots had not yet played Monday night, the game was reposted at Pick'em, so a little bit sentiment, a little adjustment towards the Jets. After Monday night's game, the Patriots were still Pick'em, and they've been bet up to a 2-point road favorite, despite the fact that they got waxed by the Chicago Bears Monday night. Just a few more here. I'll comment very briefly. You talked about the Giants-Seahawks game. Seattle was a 1-point home favorite over the summer. That's where they were after the 10-day advance line was posted. When the line reopened Sunday afternoon, they were 2.5, and they've been up to a 3-point home favorite. So a little bit of action since the summertime. Indianapolis hosting Washington over the summer, and then again in the 10-day advance line, the Colts were 6-point home favorites. As a result of last week's action where the Commanders won and the Colts lost, the line was reposted at 4.5, and the public has come in, or at least the wise guys have come in, who do a lot of the early betting on these games. Indianapolis down to just a 3-point home favorite, so that's from a 6 to a 3 in a matter of 4 or 5 days. 49ers and Rams. Rams opened were a 2.5-point road favorite. 2.5-point home favorite over the summer, and that's where they opened in the 10-day advance line. After the weekend's actions where the Rams had a bye and the 49ers played a poor second half against Kansas City, the 49ers still opened a 1-point road favorite. So it turned around from Rams being favored by 2.5 to the 49ers by 1. Line got bet up to 2, but right now 49ers still a 1.5-point road favorite, which still is a 4-point turnaround from just 10 days ago. And the final one, the game on Sunday night, and I mentioned this because of where the line was over the summer, and that's Green Bay at Buffalo. Over the summer, there was still an expected gap between these teams where this opened over the summer as 8-point home favorites. Surprisingly, when the 10-day advance line came out, they still opened as 8-point home favorites. And then after the Packers' pitiful performance last week while Buffalo was on a bye, they made a 3-point adjustment in that advance line. So whereas they were up there last Tuesday at 8, they reopened on Sunday afternoon as 11-point home favorites, the Bills did, and it's actually gone up slightly to 11.5. That's a significant move considering, I guess I was surprised, Mark, that the summertime line was 8, and considering how poorly Green Bay had played to start the season, how well Buffalo plays, that line didn't open 10.
I'm sort of with you, Andy, on that. First of all, I'm a little bit surprised that line even opened at -8 to begin with before the season began, because you're still talking about what was perceived to be Aaron Rodgers' Green Bay Packers, a leading contender for the Super Bowl out of the NFC. 8 points was a lot of points, I thought, to be laying to a Aaron Rodgers type of football team. But then you take all those factors into consideration, how poorly, as you mentioned, Green Bay has performed, and the fact that Buffalo does have that week of rest, which was, I'm sure, instilled in the beginning here. Are you surprised at all, Andy, to find Aaron Rodgers taking this many points?
I really am, but the way that they are playing and the fact that Buffalo is coming off a bye makes it very, very difficult for me to take all those points because of Buffalo's explosiveness. Look, they blew out the Rams to open the season, 31-10, the Super Bowl champs. The following week, they trade touchdowns early against Tennessee, 7-7. Final score, Bills 41-7. This team is to do great things this year. So it makes me uncomfortable to take Green Bay. Now Aaron Rodgers comes out with mistakes being made by the offense. That's not to say I'm going to play Buffalo, but it does mean I may stay away from the game, maybe get involved at some point during the game. In fact, my best situation might very well be for Green Bay to get up to a 7 or 10-point lead, then maybe come in on Buffalo. At that point,
we'll need to find out how many mushrooms Aaron Jones ingests before the beginning of the football game. We'll wait and see if that comes out on the wire or is tweeted out. We're visiting with Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. Great job on all the updates, as always, from Andy each and every week. And Andy, before we let you go, I know our listeners would like to know what you're willing to share with them for your complimentary play in the NFL this week.
I was debating between several games this week, and I decided to go with the Monday night game, the Ohio rivalry between the Bengals and the Browns. The Cleveland Browns are 3.5-point home underdogs in this game, and it's an intriguing matchup because both teams could have much better records than they have. Cincinnati is 4-3, but their 3 losses were by 3 and 2 points. Cleveland is a lowly 2-5, but 4 of the 5 losses were by 1, 3, 2, and 3 points. Their only really bad effort was the 38-15 loss to New England back in Week 6. Bengals have now won 4 of 5. With last week's 35-17 home win over Atlanta, their best performance of the season. The Browns have won all 4 games versus the Bengals, with Kevin Stefanski taking over as coach in 2020. They've won all 4 of those games and have done so with Baker Mayfield in quarterback. He missed one of the games last year at the end of the Week 18 game, but he did have a 41-16 win. Of course, he's no longer there with Carolina, but it does show that that the Browns have been able under Stefanski to figure out the Bengals to a certain extent. Last year, of course, the Browns finished 8-9 with Mayfield going through the season pretty much injured. So Cleveland may have really been a better team had they had a healthy quarterback for the entire season. And of course, the Bengals went on to lose in the Super Bowl. I give the Browns a significant edge in the running game, something that Cincinnati had hoped to be able to show some improvement this year with their prolific passing offense, averaging 164 rushing yards per game versus 87 for the Bengals. I do give the Cincinnati Bengals the edge in the passing game, both in a yards per game and yards per play basis, both the passing edge for Cincinnati and the running edge for Cleveland. It's a key game for the Browns, who play on the road at Miami and Buffalo the next 2 weeks. Coaches always stress the importance of winning home division games. Cleveland earlier defeated Pittsburgh at home, but they did lose at Baltimore. Cincinnati has dropped both of its division games so far, losing at home to Pittsburgh and also at Baltimore. I like the spot. I like the fact that both of these teams have been involved in so many close games that they lost. I think 3.5 is a generous number. I admit Bengals have the better overall stats, but this is a rivalry. Cleveland has had Cincinnati's number, so to speak, the last couple of years. No reason why this game isn't decided by a field goal. Could be either way. So if Cincinnati wins by a field goal, the 3.5 looks good. If the Browns win by a field goal, you didn't need the 3.5.
Andy Iskoe and the Cleveland Browns taking the 3.5 points against their state rival Cincinnati Bengals in a key contest for both teams. Perhaps a little bit more need for the Cleveland Browns in this football game. Andy, once again, a terrific job on the show this week. We really appreciate all your help, all your efforts, and all the knowledge you pass along. I'm going to wish you the very best of luck this week, and we'll look forward to catching up with you next week here on Mark Lawrence Against the Spread.
Mark, Victor, and to all the listeners and viewers, let's have a great Saturday and an even better Sunday.
Thank you so much. That was Andy Iskoe joining us from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. And before I get to my awesome angle of the week on the football card this week, we want to share with you a free pick from our good friend Jim Feist of Playbook Experts. Jim, if you will, take it away.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on again this week. I'm really excited about this game. It's the opposite of what I usually play, which are home dogs or road dogs. I like dogs. But this week, I've got a favorite, and it's TCU. They opened a 6.5-point favorite, and they jumped immediately to 7.5. Now, that's sharp money to me. You cross the key number like 7, and it's early in the week. So I know that's not your average player. This is definitely a pro play. So I'm going with TCU to roll West Virginia at home. TCU minus the 7.5. I look for a big 2-score, 3-score win by TCU. Thanks, Mark.
Welcome back, everybody. This is Mark Lawrence along with Victor King, and we're going against the spread on this week's college and pro football cards. It's time for our awesome angle of the week on the football card this week. We call our awesome angle Bubble Bursted. And what we're looking to do is to play against any college football team from Game 7 on out who comes off their first loss of the season. If they lost that game as a favorite of 7 or more points, and today they're taking on an opponent that's off a straight-up underdog win. These bubble-bursted teams come flat as an Aunt Jemima pancake in football games like this. Since 1995, they're just 3-12 against the spread. You play against them, that's an 80% point spread proposition. We'll be playing against Coastal Carolina when they take on Marshall, who knows how to win games as underdogs, as they did last week against James Madison. Take the points with Marshall for our awesome angle play on the football card this week. And let me hand it over to Victor King from King Creole Sports to find out what Victor's got on tap for his complimentary play. And if you would, Victor, let our listeners know about what you've got as far as the totals tip sheet is concerned as well.
Sure thing, Mark. Don't forget our newsletter special. That's the totals tip sheet, the midweek alert, and the Playbook newsletter. You can get all three for just $25. The cover price is $38. So you're saving a good chunk of change. Required reading for any NFL or college football bettor, all three of our Playbook football newsletters. I touched very briefly about that Giants Seahawks over that we were talking about. During our Andy segment, the line on that game is actually going down to 44.5 points, which is what we were looking for. So you can make your move at that target line of 44.5. Right now, it looks like multiple online sports books have that Giants Seahawks game currently at 44.5. And again, that is going to be our target line in this particular game. We got a big one this week in the NFL. It's our 5-star game of the month for October, and it's a totals play like it always is, and it's an over. And I know that's important because people love betting their overs in the NFL. Unders, not so much. But last week it was 4-star over the total in the Raiders-Texans game. 2 weeks ago, it was a 4-star over the total winner in the Browns-Patriots game. And 3 weeks ago, it was the over of the week winner in the Seahawks-Saints game. So again, we are back on an over this week. The great thing is I did the write-up and the analysis early on Wednesday morning. It's already posted at the website. You can get our 5-star NFL game of the month, which is going over the total, and it's already up there at playbooksports.com. And, last week for our free play, Mark, we ended up taking out the clothespin, putting it on our nose, and going under the total in that Denver Broncos New York Jets game. The OU outcome was pretty much never in doubt. Final score was 25-9 or something like that, but it was a low-scoring game. We brought home the bacon with that one, and we're going to do the same thing this week, and that's put the clothespin on and go under the total in a division game as the Carolina Panthers take on the Atlanta Falcons. Now, if you read this week's totals tip sheet newsletter, you already know that NFL same division games have gone under the total this season at a 71% clip. Only 10 division games have gone over, while 25 of them have gone under the total, 71% under. So knowing that, I'm looking at this week's division schedule, and I'm looking for the best under potential on the board, and it's the Carolina-Atlanta game. A series which is low scoring to begin with. The last 17 meetings between these two NFC South teams have gone 4 overs and 13 unders. And if all you care about is recent history, 3 of the last 4 meetings have gone under the total as well between these two, with an average of only 38.3 combined points per game on the season. Now, again, like our target number in the Seattle New York Giants game, in this game, our number that we are shooting for is 41.5 or higher. I say that because, again, the number 41 is a key number when it comes to totals. There are many different scoring possibilities, given the fact that a touchdown's worth 7 and a field goal's worth 3, in which a game can finish exactly on 41 points. That's what the line currently is in the game, 41.5. Again, make sure that is your target line as we play the Panthers and the Falcons under the total, 41.5 or higher. What I like about this game is that both these teams do not pass the ball a lot. They're both ranked in the bottom 6 in the NFL in passing attempts per game. Atlanta in last week's game against Cincinnati, despite the fact that they were down by double digits from the get-go, still only threw 13 passes and ran the ball 30 times.
Wow.
That's not right. According to game script, when a team is down by multiple touchdowns, they accentuate the pass. But Atlanta did not do that in the second half of that game. They still ran the ball 30 times and only threw the ball 13 times. And with P.J. Walker at quarterback for Carolina, they only threw the ball 22 times. So you could have a ton of rushing plays in this game. And Mark, for me, the clincher is with Carolina off that big win against Tampa last week and Atlanta off that ugly loss against Cincinnati. This has gone 2-14 in our database over the last 3 seasons. Any week 15 or earlier game in which one team is off a straight up win of 17 or more, that's Carolina, versus any opponent who's off a straight up loss of 17 or more, and that is Atlanta. These games have gone 2 overs, 14 unders in the last 3 years. Make sure your target number is 41.5 or higher as we play the Panthers and Falcons under the total. And don't forget, playbooksports.com, our 5-star NFL game of the month is flying over the total. From what I hear, somebody else has got an NFL game of the month. Well, I mentioned the fact that next month could be a month to remember.
It could well be just that, Victor. 5 stars flying this week at playbooksports.com. Victor's 5-star game of the month. Yours truly, our NFL game of the month. That's part of another $99 football weekend of winners. But as Victor mentions, if you join us now for our 10-star November to remember, which will be every release we make in November, including our once-a-year 10-star college football game of the year, I'll give you this weekend as a free no-charge bonus. So you can pick up this weekend with the 5-star game of the month. Join me for November to remember. It's all just $299 complete. That's a lot of winning for 5 weeks of action for just $299. Check it out online, playbooksports.com, or give us a call toll free at 1-800-321-7777. Before I get to my complimentary play, I want to remind our listeners out there that our good friends at mybookie.ag are once again offering an up to $1,000 sign-up bonus. All you need to do is log on at mybookie.ag. They'll double your first deposit. All you need to do is mention the promo code Playbook to take advantage of this double your first deposit bonus at mybookie.ag. And with that, let's get over to our complimentary play on the card this week. We had our win streak snapped last week when Utah State failed to bring home the goods last week, but we're going to load up with a double-digit dog that I think can play this game right down to the wire. And that will be Rutgers when they take on Minnesota this week. We find the Minnesota Golden Gophers leaking oil right now, if you will. They're 0-3 straight up against the spread and in the stats. Their last 3 football games, they've been outyarded 3 contests in a row. And in fact, take a look inside the midweek alert at their stat logs, which is just terrific if you're handicapping football games for meaningful stats and information. You'll see Minnesota, since their first game of the season and every game thereafter, has gotten worse every game with yardage allowed in the contest. From a skinny little less than 100 their first game, every game gets worse and worse and worse. That's not the sign of a good team right now that's laying double digits in a football game, and right now is also leaking oil in the contest as well. You've got Rutgers with the number 7 ranked defense in college football this year, just 282 yards a game. That's because Rutgers has outyarded 5 of their 7 opponents this year. With both of these teams at 4-3 on the season, there's no way a team should be taking 14 points in this contest, especially when they may have all the better numbers in the contest. Give me Rutgers plus the points for my complimentary play on the football card this week. And just a quick note, if you're interested in all of our videos from our Playbook experts, simply log on at PB, that's PB for Playbook, .buzz, B-U-Z-Z, /video. That's pb.buzz /video for a list of all the videos that you can load up and watch on the playbooksports.com website. That's going to do it for this edition of Mark Lawrence Against the Spread. I want to thank our co-host Victor King from King Krill Sports, our good friend Andy Iskoe joining us from Las Vegas for the Vegas Vibe as he does each and every week. And until next week, this is Mark Lawrence reminding you to always remember to bet with your head, not over it, and good luck as always.